The King's Avatar, Chapter 1339, Writing a Guide for Yourself. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1339, Writing a Guide for Yourself. Translator, Gnome Yummy. Editor, Gnome Yummy. Luoji had lost. This result wasn't too unexpected, but at the beginning, he felt that he had been doing quite well. His confidence was being slowly built up, but who would have predicted that his opponent would knock it down again so quickly? His opponent wasn't anyone impressive either. The only thing he held over Luoji was 27 rounds of experience. What was this? Luoji was puzzled. At first he thought that this was their home game, fans respecting Miracle's spectacular performance and applauding them. However, after he left the stage, walking away, he noticed the calls of "Luoji, you did great," and the gazes that were on him. This wasn't just from observing the player bench during matches, but because Happy's boss Chen Guo never forgot to mention Luoji when she brought up Happy's players. In fact, to make sure Luo Li was noticed, she'd often be willing to talk more about Luoji. Though Luoji had never fought a match, Chen Guo wouldn't hesitate to tell everyone of the contributions he had made to the team. This was a testament of Chen Guo's attentiveness. She hated the thought of this benched player feeling uncomfortable or left out, so she did her best to show that he was equally as much a part of the team as anyone else. Chen Guo's actions finally bore fruit at a time like now. Not only did Happy's fans know Luoji, they all liked this member of Happy who, despite not having much of a chance to play for the team, had still carefully and sincerely contributed to the team. They were even hoping for the day Luoji would have a chance to play. Thus, when Luoji really did get the chance to play a match, what he received wasn't pressure, but encouragement. Applause and well wishes escorted Luoji step by step back to the player bench. When he first came out of the player booth, he had truly thought that the applause was for him because he had thought he fought spectacularly in this match, just like an expert. "I've even managed to sway the hearts of my opponent's fans," Joshing thought to himself in delight. That wasn't an easy thing to accomplish at all. He waved, continuing to show off his demeanor, and acknowledging these cute happy fans that were clapping for him. He stiffened. He suddenly wanted nothing more than to cut off that damned waving hand. This Luoji was so well liked amongst Happy's fans. Even if he lost, he could still gain everyone's love like that. Joshing stared at Luoji, who had returned to the player bench with a heart full of envy. Luoji sat in the empty seat next to Yishu without needing any prompting. Even if Yishu didn't come to find him, he would go and ask Yishu for pointers regarding this match. Depressed from losing? When it had just ended, a little, yeah. Then, hearing the cheers and encouragements from the fans after exiting the booth, Luoji was determined to work even harder in order to thank his team and the fans for their support. Luoji had noticed Chen Guo's efforts in trying to make sure he didn't feel left out. Yishu didn't bother with courtesies, getting straight to the point. "Yes." Luoji nodded. "Your control was meticulous. That's your strength." Yishu continued. "Yes." Luoji nodded again. His calculations were accurate, thus his actions were meticulous. Luoji understood himself well. "Yet that's exactly how you lost." Yishu then said, "Your opponent is a person, not a machine. A person's mechanics, a person's performance, will never be as precise as theory. Sometimes they might be in a poor condition, other times they might go beyond their usual limits. Your playstyle has to account for these changes in your opponent's pace," Yishu explained. "Do you remember the dummies guides you used to make often?" Yishu asked. "I do." Luoji nodded. "Your current control has the same flaws as your guides for dummies. They don't tolerate mistakes and deviations," Yishu said. Oh. Luoji immediately understood what Yishu was getting at. He thought of when his opponent had used Dragon Breaks the Ranks to break throughout his summons. In his calculations, that opening wasn't something this opponent had the ability to grasp. But his opponent had broken past his own limits, achieving a hand speed and mechanics he wouldn't have been able to usually.
Thus, what Luoji had thought wouldn't happen, happened, and his playstyle didn't have any way to make up for this.
It seemed like his calculations regarding his opponent's ability wasn't comprehensive enough. However, just as Yishu had said, a person's condition would fluctuate and change. Even they themselves would be incapable of controlling this. It was impossible for another to completely account for this in their calculations. Then what do I do? The best way is, of course, to refine your playstyle further. Yishu replied. Luoji felt a headache coming on. He naturally understood this reasoning. More refined attacks, harder to counter attacks that would naturally allow him to suppress and defeat his opponents. The problem was that his ability was limited. He could only refine his playstyle within the boundaries of his talent. This best way was something he couldn't choose, or else he'd have tried ages ago. If you can't refine everything, then what about smaller parts? Yishu then said. Partly refine? Consider Mofan, Yishu suggested. Luoji was stunned for a moment. What did Mofan have to do with this? Currently, Mofan was already on the stage for the third individual match. The projection and the big screen were both playing the scenes of his and his opponent killing each other. Whoosh. A rapid 5-part combo had Deception's opponent floundering. I'll probably never be able to accomplish that, Luoji thought to himself. However, Deception, after a few impressive combos, quickly fled the area. Luoji naturally knew why Mofan's playstyle was like so, and thus instantly realized why Yishu wanted him to consider Mofan. Yishu meant that for certain controls, Luoji might not be able to refine completely, but some simpler actions were things that he could definitely master with his current ability. Rebuilding his offensive system through fully utilizing these actions he could master. Luoji felt like he was beginning to understand. All this time, he had been referencing guides, learning all sorts of summoner knowledge. He already knew what he should learn, what he should master. Therefore what he needed to do now was find the things that were most suited to him, the things he could do the best in. Just like deciding on the 4 beasts style, he had to choose what suited him the most. It was time he wrote a dummy's guide for himself. I understand. Luoji nodded. Yishu smiled. Speaking with smart people was always the easiest. Just look in Luoji and then consider Mofan, who is currently on stage. Okay, he'll admit, speaking to Mofan wasn't all a waste, but getting steamed bun with his unique brain structure and planes of thinking to understand was truly harder than hard. WuxaWorldAudio.com. After the individual matches, the group arena soon ended. Mofan had claimed victory for the third individual match, and the group arena saw the powerful formation of Tangru, Suma Chung and Feng Rui successfully defeating Miracle, giving them a 4-1 lead as they entered the team competition. In the team competition, Happy had everyone shocked, fielding Feng Rui, Suma Chung, Tangru, Chao Yifan, and Wenyi and Steamed Bun. They had let Yishu rest for a round. Holy crap. Before anyone else reacted, Miracle, who was fielding all their core members, expressed their discontent first. Miracle had 3 previous Excellent Era members. They believed that they had a comprehensive understanding of Yishu, of Suma Chung, and of their teamwork. Last time, Happy had swept them 0-10. Thus, this time, they had made even more preparations. They had carefully honed their tactics to deal with Yishu and Suma Chung, determined to win back their points on Happy's home turf. Yet then,
Yishu wasn't even participating in the team competition this round.
Was this Yishu looking down on them? Miracle's little group felt somewhat offended, but then, thinking back on the time they were with Yishu in Excellent Era, when had the other ever looked down on anyone? No matter how weak, he'd never do that. He would only mock them. No matter how strong the opponent, he'd always manage to find something to mock them for. So was this a way of mocking them? The 3 considered it again. However, not playing a match didn't seem like Yishu's method of mockery. The three were distressed. They should have been laughing and delighted their opponent's strongest player not being fielded, but Miracle treated this as some sort of hateful, despicable thing. Nothing was more painful than dedicating yourself to rehearsing and practicing, but then finding out right before going on stage that it was no longer necessary. The show had been changed. Absolutely shameless. Miracle's three brothers felt anger burning inside them. Even so, we can't lose. Quote, He Ming said to the players about to go on stage. Then he saw Guo Xiao's confused blinking. He Ming immediately realized his words seemed off. Even so? Even so what? With his tone and wording, it was like without Yishu, their opponents just got stronger. That wasn't right at all. Yishu was Happy's core. Without him on the field, Happy's overall strength would only decrease, not increase. Ahem. Quote, He Ming cleared his throat, trying to figure out what to say. If Senior Yishu isn't being fielded, then does that mean our tactic is useless? Guo Xiao's words struck them straight in the gut. Yes. However, without Yishu, their strength will definitely be affected. This is our chance. He Ming used this to turn them back on track. What should we do then? Guo Xiao asked. He Ming short-circuited. This was because the current situation was truly the worst. Their pre-match practice was all about dealing with Yishu, completely ignoring this possibility. Who would have thought that after 27 rounds, on the 28th with them, Yishu would decide to do this? Miracle's pre-match preparations were all for nothing and they couldn't really come up with any detailed plan on what to do. Focus on. He Ming looked throughout Happy's lineup. Chao Yifan. This name suddenly popped out. Yes, Chao Yifan. He Ming nodded, saying with confidence, and chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1340 Wind Howl's New Playstyle, Audio Source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 1340, Wind Howl's New Playstyle. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. He Ming was the sixth player when he was at Excellent Era. Players of this position were generally suddenly switched in while the two sides were deep in conflict. So they had to have the ability to read the situation and immediately understand what was happening, thus allowing him to join in and come to their teammates' aid as soon as possible. He Ming usually played this position in Excellent Era, so his abilities in regards to this were considerable. Judging the situation, observing the tactics, he was rather good at all that. So who should they focus on first out of Happy's current lineup? Cleric Little Cold Hands. Often considered Happy's weakness, Happy's cleric was usually the main focus of other teams in the team competition. However, precisely because of this, Happy would often have a very meticulous plan to protect their cleric. The teams who tried to attack Happy from this direction would often get led around by the nose instead, using the opponent's strategy against them. That was something Yishu simply loved to do. Of the four master tacticians, Yishu was definitely the one with the most sophisticated plans and schemes, no matter if it came to his sheer experience or simply his style. As the glory textbook, he could put himself into another's shoes and predict a lot of possible strategies his opponents would use and counter them. Thus, any team of which he was a part of, if you didn't have absolute confidence in being able to take advantage of an obvious weakness, it was best to leave it be. Miracle was currently a new team, not any sort of powerhouse, and He Ming naturally didn't have enough confidence to challenge the traps Yishu had laid. Thus, the choice Little Cold Hands was thrown out. Apart from that, Su Mucheng. They were familiar with Su Mucheng from a teammate's perspective, but Su Mucheng was a launcher. For ranged fighters, if they wanted to use screen cannon, they could often stay out of the main battlefield. If they targeted her, the entire team might get kitted around and thus fall to a heavy disadvantage. This wasn't a good breakthrough point. Then, Fang Rui, master of dirty play. This Nope, never mind. Ming thought to himself. A tricky and cunning opponent like that wasn't one a young, new team like them could deal with. Then, there was Tang Rou, the fearsome battle mage. Even if her reputation had taken a hit, no one dared to underestimate her actual skill. Just now, in the group arena, Tang Rou had gone first and had almost managed to wipe out two of Miracle's players. Though she had yet to defeat a god, her persistence, her aggression meant that she definitely had the ability to pin an opponent like a god-level player. If they targeted Tang Rou, they might end up pinned by her, unable to escape. Thus, looking over Happy's starting lineup, it seemed that Qiao Yivan was the only choice for a breakthrough. Plus, his ghost charring was very dangerous. Dealing with him first would mean to alter the battle situation entirely. Let's go. Quote, with limited time, Ming quickly adjusted their tactics a little before leading the team on stage. At the same time, at another much-anticipated match, Wind Howl vs 301 Degrees had already entered the team competition stage. In the 1v1s, the two teams had ended up with a 4-1, Wind Howl taking the lead on their home turf and only losing 1 point. As for the team competition afterwards, man to man, Wind Howl seemed to have tasted the sweetness of this strategy after their victory against Blue Rain. For them, who didn't have any sort of high-end strategy at the moment, dividing the opponents and conquering them through isolating the match into 5 1v1s which depended on individual strength seemed like a good choice. Of course, Wind Howl wasn't naive enough to think that 301 Degrees wouldn't be watching out for this strategy after that last match. When the match begun, Wind Howl, very uncharacteristically, didn't charge right for the center of the map. This was something extremely rare after Tang Hao had become the captain. Wind Howl used their map advantage for their home game and split up, preparing to observe 301 Degrees from the flanks. After approaching, they saw that, as expected, 301 Degrees was on guard against their man-to-man offense they had used against Blue Rain. The characters of 301 Degrees were all standing closer together than usual. Every character could assure that they'll have at least 2 other characters' support. If they charge right in, they probably wouldn't be able to tear their team apart. However, since Wind Howl had been expecting their opponents to be on guard against this, they naturally had their own way to deal with it. This week, Team Wind Howl had focused on practicing how to dismantle an opponent in a formation primed for teamwork and support, tearing them apart into one-on-ones. After observing 301 Degrees' current formation, they quickly communicated their plans in their team channel, and then Wind Howl's characters charged out from the sides. Brawler, Demon Subduer, Elementalist, Beautiful Light, Spellblade, Total Darkness, Chi Master, Chi Breaker, Thief, Doubtful Demon. 5 classes, no healer. Wind Howl had once again executed this daring strategy. Demon Subduer, Tyrannical Chain Punch. Tang Hao's Demon Subduer was the first to lunge. For this skill, shoving the opponent onto the ground was equal to a grab, a very powerful control. Chi Breaker, Cloud Grasping Fist. Guo Yang had truly met an opportunity at Wind Howl this season, though his current Chi Master character, Chi Breaker, was rather weak. Although this was the powerful Chi Master of Excellent Era's glorious past. When the Challenger League happened, Excellent Era didn't have a Chi Master character, and so this character wasn't upgraded with the big update. It wasn't until Wind Howl bought the character for a low price or Excellent Era's clearance sale that its equipment began to be upgraded, so it was natural that it was a little behind. However, for Guo Yang, this was the character he was most familiar with, one he had used for years, and it was much smoother than the character Wind Howl had given him last year. Although Wind Howl hadn't had the best journey this season, he only got better with time and stabilized his position as the last member of Wind Howl's team competent lineup. In the current Wind Howl, apart from Ruin Yanglan, all the players had changed from before. Right now, he cooperated with Tang Hao. Of the two fighters, one closed in and grabbed a target and the other snatched a target from afar. Afterwards, Beautiful Light began the cast for the AoE Heavenly Lightning Earth and Fire, while Lu Hao's Total Darkness sent Wave Sword after Wave Sword into 301 degrees formation. Lin Feng's Doubtful Demon, a battle thief that didn't care for dirty play, went into pursuit, using this opportunity to start isolating his own target. Wind Howl's teamwork isn't bad. Commentator Li Yibo called out. Team 301 degrees was clearly having some trouble reacting to Wind Howl's offensive. Demon Subduer's attack should be dodged. Chi Breaker and Beautiful Light's attacks should be interrupted, but the two were far off. Total Darkness Wave Sword attacks were sweeping into their team, cutting up their formation. WuxaWorldAudio.com. Everything had occurred simultaneously, and there wasn't enough time for giving orders. In these situations, they could only rely on their teamwork and synchronization, on the reactions of the individual team members. However, 301 degrees weakness was unfortunately exposed. Their team had their new core member join during the winter transfer window, and their strategy had gone through a metamorphosis. Though they were doing well, it didn't change the fact that they were still in a transitional period, still trying to get familiar with one another. Thus, in a situation that necessitated a high level of synchronization between team members, where they had to be able to divide up their workloads, they erred. Chi Breaker's cloud-grasping fist wasn't interrupted, and Night Tide was pulled out of the formation. Tide was originally using his shield to shield his teammates from Total Darkness Wave Swords, preventing their formation from being ruined. But with him dragged off, Total Darkness Wave Swords reached their formation, and 301 degrees formation scattered as the team members dodged. Lin Feng's Doubtful Demon took the opportunity to dart in, using a staggering blow to Dizzy Gaoji's Stellar Sword. Though Demon Subduer's tyrannical chain punch had been dodged, Demon Subduer managed to grab 301 degrees Paladin, Sun Mingjin's 007, and throw him out of the formation in the confusion. Currently, 301 degrees formation had been completely destroyed. They hurriedly tried to adjust, but the weakness in their lacking synchronization once again surfaced. In the blink of an eye, they were thrown to a dire disadvantage. In the end, Wind Howl won, which surprised many. No one would have thought that the 301 degrees that everyone was nervous about facing, having been reborn after the winter transfer window with a new set of tactics, would lose to a team like Wind Howl, who were seen as weak. After Blue Rain, 301 degrees, too. If succeeding the first time was just because they had it easy by catching their opponents off guard. But this time 301 degrees had clearly been on guard against this playstyle of Wind Howl's, yet in the end, they still didn't manage to defend against it. Team Wind Howl acted swiftly, precisely, utilizing this man-to-man offensive to its fullest. I believe that we can reignite our hopes for this team. They seem to have found the style that suits them, Li Yiba commented post-match. But wouldn't just one playstyle be too simple? Pan Lin wondered aloud. One playstyle can be used in many different ways. I believe that Team Wind Howl won't just stop here. They'll definitely continue to practice and perfect this playstyle. Of course, this doesn't mean that we can say for certain that they don't have any other strategies. In any case, this playstyle is a good new addition to Team Wind Howl's strategies. In the future, whenever a team faces Wind Howl, they'd have to be on guard for this and will have to practice countering this. This, in and of itself, is already one way to hinder their opponents. Li Yibo explained. You're too right. And this is where Wind Howl and 301 Degrees match ends. This match really was fast. Currently, all other matches are still fighting their team competitors. Quote, this live broadcast was surprisingly quick to end, and the broadcasting channel was probably adjusting the plans for the time they had left over. The match had ended, but the broadcast was continuing. Pan Lin and Li Yibo then turned the match broadcast into a talk show. Hey, we can take a look at the other matches, Li Yibo suggested. Wait. Pan Lin merely took a glance before he cried out. Ye Zhu didn't appear in the team competition between Happy and Miracle. Oh. How come? We didn't get any news of this. Is he hurt, or did he fight in the individual competitions? Li Yibo asked, rapid fire. He did fight in the individual competition, continuing his streak. Pan Lin looked over the information. Huh? Luo Ji's appeared to play in this round. Li Yibo was stunned for a moment. Sending up rookies for experience, their team's core player Ye Zhu not playing. Does Happy think that their position in the playoffs is secured and they can treat the remaining matches as trying for their troops? End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1341. An uneventful round. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1341. An uneventful round. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Pan Lin and Li Yibo were surprised at the arrangements Happy had made this round, and at this point, Happy and Miracle were deep into their match. Target Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash. He Ming's analysis and plan was good in theory, but reality told him that Qiao Yifan wasn't someone they could wipe out so easily. When the two sides met, they didn't see a hint of 1-inch ash. The other had gone on some strategic approach. Matches weren't so inflexible. Since their target wasn't there, they weren't going to cling to this plan, ignore what was in front of them and run off to find their target. Thus, Miracle, seeing that they had the advantage in numbers, decided to just go for it. They did, in fact, have the advantage in numbers, and a huge advantage too. When the two sides met face to face, Miracle was a full team of 5 while Happy was only Tang Rou and Su Muchung's characters. 5v2, what was there to be afraid of? Miracle swarmed over, but they knew that Happy wouldn't just send 2 people for them to kill, so they were on guard for if Happy would suddenly attack from some other direction. 5v2, with this exchange, there had yet to be a result, but He Ming, Wang Zhe and Shen Jian felt rather anxious. What were they up against? The combo of a battle mage and a launcher. The combo they were most familiar with, the one that the team they had spent years in revolved around. Plus, in the past this combo had done it all: 2v1, 2v2, 2v3, 2v4, 2v5. Subconsciously, He Ming and co had erased their advantage in number from their mind. Advantage? What advantage? They were the ones pinned. Soon enough, Fang Rui's Boundless Sea appeared and Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash also arrived from their right and left flanks, executing a pincer attack on Miracle. 1-inch ash had appeared, but the goal of focusing on getting rid of 1-inch ash wasn't going to be easy to accomplish at all. He Ming and co shockingly realized that they had been trapped. Also, this scene was too familiar. In the past, it was their opponents who would be trapped by the battle mage and launcher duo, while they caused trouble from the sides. So in the end, it was the strategy we were most familiar with. He Ming and the other 2 spirits fell. Lord Grim and Dancing Rain had used their familiarity with these 2 opponents to craft a strategy to counteract them. Lord Grim straight up didn't show up though, yet it was like Miracle had lost their core. In the end, however, Soft Mist and Dancing Rain had executed a playstyle that was far more familiar to them than Lord Grim and Dancing Rain, giving them a sense of déjà vu. Sigh, if they had known earlier. He Ming and co all held such thoughts. In the end, the team competition ended in Happy's victory, and Happy had won a spectacular score of 9-1 this round. In the post-match press conference, no one had much interest in Miracle, and their press conference ended quickly. When Happy arrived, the reports naturally expressed great interest in Luo Ji's appearance in the match and Yi Zhu's lack thereof in the team competition. The answer they received was that they were preparing for the playoffs. Happy already getting into the pace for the playoffs. Soon enough, such headlines appeared on the news. However, this wasn't really anything to be too shocked about. The season was approaching its last stages, and teams that had stable scores were already preparing themselves for the playoffs. No matter now or before, the playoffs had always been different from the regular season. The matches were frequent, and you'd have to travel back and forth for the home and away games. This truly did necessitate some adjustments and planning. However, it was only round 28. Wasn't Happy getting into the pace of the playoffs a little too soon? If they started preparing their troops and trying them, then weren't they afraid of accidentally slipping out of the playoffs list? However, this round of trying their troops still ended up with a landslide victory of 9-1, so what could anyone really say? Those Happy haters could only swallow their words in the face of reality. Round 28 was a round of landslide victories from the powerhouses. Apart from Wind Howl's 9-1 victory against 301 Degrees, nothing unexpected happened in any of the other matches. Team Happy, garnering another 9 points to their score, had 187 points in total, continuing to place 6th. Next was Team 100 Blossoms with 183. After Wind Howl had beaten 301 Degrees, they had managed to overtake the other team with their 9-1 victory. Though they had the same number of points at 167, Wind Howl had beaten 301 Degrees 9-1 this round and lost to 301 Degrees 3-7 in the 9th round. The total score of their matches was 12-8, Wind Howl in the lead, so Wind Howl was ranked above 301 Degrees despite their equal point value. Wind Howl and 301 Degrees ranking switch was the only movement for this round. The other teams all retained their original rankings. For all the teams ranked lower than number 12's Royal Style, it was more or less over for them this season. Now all that was left was to see if they would make a final charge towards garnering a few more points on the rankings. However, this motivation was primarily present in the club, and not the players. The media was diving into the small area surrounding 8th place. They didn't even bother reporting on the top-ranked powerhouses, Samsara, Blue Rain, Tiny Herb, etc. The fight for the top place in the regular season had long since lost its suspense. The powerhouses' score was stable and there was no way they would fall out of the top 8. What was there to write about? The teams heading for the top 4 did have some juice to them. After all, being in the top 4 did have the advantage of an extra home game. However, compared to the fight for the 8th place, the charge for the top 4 could be pushed to the back burner. April 3, round 29 of the Pro League, 301 Degrees welcoming Misty Rain to their home game became one of the more interesting face-offs. Misty Rain currently had 149 points, ranked 10th, was 18 points away from the 9th and 8th ranked 301 Degrees and Wind Howl. They still had hope for getting into the playoffs. However, considering Misty Rain's performance this season, most people didn't really expect anything. Team Misty Rain's new playstyle had been constantly criticized, but after the winter transfer window, they still didn't make any adjustments. In the latter half of the season, their performance hadn't improved any. Now in these last 10 rounds, no one knew if they even had the courage to make the charge for the playoffs. Though the club PR always sprouted messages about trust, diligence, fighting for a chance to turn the tables, these were things everyone knew to say. Bright Green and Seaside had also said that they wouldn't give up, but anyone could see that they had already disarmed themselves. Round 29 was rather calm. Happy had an away game against Royal Style this round. Once a top team, they had already fallen to the point where they didn't even have a chance for the playoffs. However, Royal Style's home turf was still as lively as ever. This was an old team with 10 years of history, after all. How many other teams in the Alliance had 10 years of history? There were many older fans in their home stadium. Middle-aged fans were no rare sight. This was probably a scene exclusive to older teams. WashOurWorldAudio.com. These people probably hadn't dedicated themselves to glory much later than even Yishu. Though they were only normal players, lacking the accomplishments that Yishu had achieved, they definitely didn't love glory any less, able to persist for a full 10 years. Glory had already become an integral part of their lives. Royal Style had completely fallen, but these people didn't leave. Like how glory was an integral part of their lives, a Royal Style was an integral part of their glory. They had gotten used to supporting this team. If they did well, then good. If they didn't, it didn't matter either. They were no longer fans at an age where they would run over to young players and new promising teams, howling with excitement. In the first individual competition, Happy continued to field Yishu, and the audience even applauded when Yishu entered the stage. They had watched 10 years of glory, so they held respect for this veteran of 10 years. Thought this guy had crushed Royal Style in the finals of the very first season of the Glory Pro League. Royal Style didn't have as big of a grudge as Tyranny. After all, they only held a grudge for this 1 year, not like how Excellent Era and Tyranny had gone back and forth for a full 4 years, always clashing in the finals. That would naturally result in such a huge grudge. The applause was rather surprising for Yishu, and he acknowledged the audience with a wave. Thinking of Royal Style's past, and then the present, Yishu grew deeply nostalgic. Then, on the stage, seeing the opposing player and character, Yishu's breath hitched with emotion. Tian Sen, Peaceful Hermit. Royal Style had sent out their core and captain in the first match against Yishu. Unlike Wind Howl sending Tang Hao up first, Royal Style had probably arranged this with a very different attitude. In this season, they wouldn't be able to do much more or aim for anything further. Thus, they relaxed, and even their core came over to fight an individual match. They probably wanted to try breaking Yishu's record, giving their team a little boost and their fans some action. After all, if they just ended it like this, it would be way too calm. Peaceful Hermit. Yishu gazed at the character projected by the central projector of the stadium. This was the character that fought with Yishu over the championship of the very first season of the Glory Pro Alliance. Back then, One Autumn Leaf, Desert Dust and this Peaceful Hermit were the 3 most elite, most famous characters of the Alliance. And now, Peaceful Hermit. Now how many young people still remembered the strength of this character? In the All-Stars this season, Peaceful Hermit didn't even get in. Tian Sen. Yishu looked to Peaceful Hermit's current player, getting into the player booth on the other side. This player, tall and built more like an athlete than an esports player, always seemed to struggle to get into the booth more than others. It was somewhat comical. The golden generation, the batch of rookies that had shone the brightest, had all become core members of their teams. Tian Sen was probably the most tragic of them. His pro career had consisted of watching as Royal Style declined from a top powerhouse to a team that didn't even had hoped to enter the playoffs. Yet he still persisted, silently. In the winter transfer window, 301 Degrees had invited him to join their team. Before Team Royal Style could express anything, he had stepped forth to speak his own mind. No matter how well they did, just by this heart, he was a player deserving of respect. As Yishu entered the player booth, he thought of the player who had peaceful hermit before Tian Sen. That player had been known as one of the three gods of that era along with Yishu and Han Wenqing, Guo Mingyu. God, my ass. Yishu cursed as he inserted his account card into the card reader. He owes me money, and he just disappeared like that. What an ass.